Hi, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Web of Weird podcast. Today, it's my great pleasure to be introducing to you somebody new to our community who's got some incredible gifts to share, which we're going to be talking about today. We just really completed the Elder Global Immersion, and that was a really profound and powerful experience for everybody that took part. But today, my guest here on this special edition of Web of Weird is Shirley Chantal, Lemurian Dreamweaver, channeler, artist, and musician, I guess you could say, but far too modest to accept any of those accolades. But Shirley, good evening to you. It's lovely to be talking to you. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good morning to you. So we're kind of at opposite ends of the world. And yeah, I'm still coming off of the eclipse energies. It's really strong. I'm finding it really hard to ground and come back to earth, but it's good. It's good that we're doing this and trying to make a little sense of all of it.
Right, exactly. And so, as you just pointed out, you are already in tomorrow, for those of us who are in today. So the eclipse has already happened for you, and it's full moon in Taurus, of course. I know you're also interested in astrology, and hopefully we're going to be bringing some of that into play a little bit throughout the course of chat today. So how are you feeling the energies of the eclipse, Shirley? What's your take on it so far? What's been coming to you? What's your energetic impression about it all?
Yeah, well, it's incredibly big this time around. I think we always kind of knew it because, this Taurus Scorpio axis, it's deep. The Scorpio takes you into a rather deep place, and it enjoys it. And then Taurus is slow to take. Taurus doesn't move fast. He doesn't want to, rush into anything. But as it's taking its time to enter, it's really taking in the process, like it's really breathing. So I know that in our chat about Elder, we spoke a little bit about the story of the Minotaur and the labyrinth because we're connected to the Taurus axis. And the idea of the labyrinth always brings us back into the center of the labyrinth where we come into the center of it and we start to, become the center of that creation instead of being lost in it. But the bull takes its time, it's not supposed to run through and finish it in 5 seconds. So
Right.
so I think that's a lesson for this eclipse as well, for us to really let it sink in and not be in a hurry to say, okay, what's the lesson? What am I supposed to learn? What am I supposed to get out of this? Okay, great. And then move on. I don't think it's meant to be that way. I think it's meant to take its time to sink in. And the ruler of Taurus, who's Venus, and Venus is in Scorpio right now. It's a darker place for her. It's a deeper place for her. She has to let go of that fleshy, luxurious side of her and really get in touch with a very deep part of herself that we seldomly see and we seldomly associate with her. So I think this eclipse is going to help us do the same and get in touch with parts of ourselves that we maybe have covered up and we have not found the courage to really meet, and allow that to come up and release, because it's a full moon and full moons are all about releasing. And we know that in our ascension journey, we do need to release so that we can become lighter and we can embody more of our light body.
Right.
How are you feeling?
Nice. Well, I'm still putting the pieces together, I feel. It's been quite an intense period, and we're going to look back to how we met in a minute, because it kind of paints the picture for how this conversation's come to be. So everything you've said is kind of super relevant, but also you just caught my attention before we do that about the whole process with the labyrinth and the bull, which we talked about in the Elder Immersion, which we'll also allude to a bit later on too. And even though I guess many of us might want this all to be over a lot quicker than it seems to be happening, there is also a process, as you've kind of pointed out, and this was a long eclipse, 5 hours in total. So I think, if I remember correctly, doesn't the amount of hours relate to the amount of months or even years that the effect of the eclipse will be felt?
I think so. I'm not an authority on that, but I think so.
Right. So I guess maybe in a fractal universe, the next 5 months and the next 5 years will be somehow felt by this eclipse. So it's powerful. And we know in the wider astrology that we have an interesting run now until the end of the year. And then the astrology shows that, that by maybe early 24, that we're going to be through the worst of whatever is going to happen over the next year and a half. And let's hope that it's something really nice. But look, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here, and perhaps not being so Taurian, and perhaps being a little bit more Scorpio and getting ahead of ourselves. So let's get back into how we first started communicating, and perhaps you can share with our audience what it is that you do and how did we make the first connection, Shelley?
So in 2020, much as it was a tough time for the world, I had a very different experience. I was traveling a lot for work at that time, where I still had a real job in the real world. And I started to get a lot of gifts come online, even though I was still working a full-time job. One of these gifts was channeling art, and I have absolutely no background in art. When I was a child, I went for art lessons, and the teacher told my mother, please don't waste your time or your money. Your daughter simply cannot draw. So, it was a surprise. Three things came into my life at that time in succession: the tarot, crystals, and then the energy was then transferred to the art channeling. So as I started channeling art, at the beginning, I didn't even understand what light language was. And a spiritual teacher at that time said to me, this is light language. And I'm like, oh, what is light language? And it's been a journey of unfolding and of sort of coming to terms with what it is I do. And one day, through client work, I discovered myself channeling flower essences. And I thought, that can't be right. I don't know anything about plants. Like, I don't know anything about flowers. Like, what's happening here? And then that grew into a whole set of artworks, of over 20 artworks. And I was really perplexed. At some point, I thought, I am just going nuts. Like, this is I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. And then I found your work through the work of Pam Gregory, whom we all know and love. And I thought, oh, this is a guy that talks to plants, and he's offering like one-on-one sessions. So I thought I would book a session with you to discover if I'm really channeling plants or some lower dimensional like entity. So that was the beginning of how we met.
Right.
Yeah.
And from my side, we had the session. It was immediately clear that the plants were very strongly with you, and that's when the whole kind of discussion went to a much bigger space. And that was right before we did the elder immersion. And then what happened in the intervening period between, I think, if I remember this correctly, between doing the one-to-one session, then the elder immersion, was a whole bunch of stuff started to come through, which we then did a discussion on in the elder immersion. Perhaps you can just share briefly a little bit about that process, because we are going to share that piece too in a few days here on the YouTube channel. So it's kind of an interesting bookend to what happened before and what's happened since. So it's kind of interesting, I think.
Yes. So my first immersion with you was the Artemisius immersion, and I had no idea what I was getting into.
Don't think any of us did.
So at that time, the channeling wasn't super strong. There was one piece that came through because I thought I would tap in, but so much else was unraveling, and I was discovering all about tinctures and oils. So I was pretty scattered. I think I was just experimenting and starting to feel how it was like in the body. But as soon as you said, we're doing 2 more immersions, the elder and the you, and as soon as you said elder and I looked at what elder meant, I knew instinctively that she's been speaking to me since, I would say, about probably 4 or 5 months ago, because I was looking for this scorpionic kind of a death transformation energy. I just didn't know where it was coming from. There was this voice, it was speaking about Scorpio season, and I couldn't identify her because I didn't know her. So she's the elder, and I was like, oh, so she's the one, this is her voice. So I sat down with her and I started saying, if you would bless me, and bless us with your energy, and you think I was a good enough vessel, a suitable enough conduit in that sense, please help us understand through my art. So a set of 7 pieces came through.
Mm-hmm.
It was very magical. It was like taking a journey all by itself. And every piece related to her, and it related to, I think, transformation on the whole. So it was almost like a meditative journey where you had a few steps to follow and find within yourself how you could transmute your pain and the darkness that's around you or in your past, in your karma, and how that could be transmuted into the light. So not to be, suppressed or repressed, but really to embrace and then welcome it into the light. So more love, not less.
Right. Wow. And so we're going to be sharing the interview that we did about that, which we did right at the end of the Elder Immersion. We were working with a Mayan wave spell, and it was the day of collaboration and art and beauty, which I think was the day before the end of the immersion and the wave spell finishing. And so we're going to be sharing that piece also on the YouTube channel, so you can see how did the process unfold. It's a really beautiful experience. And even as we were doing the talk together, many pieces were dropping in and still being channeled through, really. And of all of the plants I've ever worked with, Elder is the one that has shown me best how to be the hollow bone or the clear channel, because that's what she really asks of us. In order to be able to tap into that higher wisdom, cosmic intelligence, we need to have a clear channel and to be the hollow bone, so that the words, the transmissions, the sentiments, even the sounds maybe, but certainly the visuals or the art can come through in a clean vessel, which can then be expressed. And that's what you did so beautifully with those pieces for the Elder Immersion. So without giving too much away, you can, if you are interested to see what happened there, then we will be sharing that too. But so that's prompted us to do this piece now. And you've been channeling some other beautiful artworks, which we're going to be sharing today because it's the eclipse. It's still going on for us somehow, but of course the energy is going to be unfolding. And so, how would you like to share the pieces that you channeled for today's eclipse? And I know we're going to talk through each of them in different ways and bring in some different themes that we feel are relevant to share wherever you'd like the images, Shelley, from the beginning.
So if you don't mind, let's cut to the images, because a whole set came through. I thought I would be doing one piece, maybe two, and a whole set came through, and they wanted to express themselves together. They said that we were one energy. So yeah, let me put that on. All right. Let me know if you can see this full screen.
Looking good. Yeah.
Okay, great. So this was the sort of the base piece that came through. And usually I use the base pieces as backgrounds. But when this came through, I was like, oh my God, it's a complete piece all by itself. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, it's already done. So I was shown that, this is the base energy. I guess the green refers a lot to the Taurian energy, which is the energy of Earth as well. There is, because the eclipse is conjunct, or actually it's exactly conjunct Uranus and Taurus, I still feel like there is a strong energy of new Earth coming through this eclipse. Like, if eclipse are portals, and this is exactly conjunct new Earth, just put that together. This is a portal to new Earth, right? And the energy that is coming through, it's like fractals, which to me always represent multidimensionality. New Earth is not as linear as we think it is. Like in the past, people used to think of Earth as a place, like a thing, a raw material, like she's the thing you get wood from or earth from or a soil. And today we know that's not true. She's a living being. So how are we going to, embrace that as we move forward? And this is that base energy that we work with. And I only realized yesterday that if I were to expand this piece into like sort of stitch it up. So I
Wow.
repeated, stitched it up. It turned into something completely different. And I was like, oh
Wow.
my God, I didn't even realize this was there. And it's the same piece repeated 9 times. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's like a kaleidoscope of experiences. And this
Right.
then came to me that as we step into the Aquarian age, which is, you know, the energy of New Earth as we step away from the Piscean age, you know, it's
Yeah.
both very collective and it's very individualistic. And we are all fractals and we're all co-creators in this journey. So we're reflecting to each other the different dimensions that we each can see and we each can hold, so that all together, when we come together, we form that greater picture, like pieces of a puzzle. What do you
Right.
think when you see about this piece, or what do you feel?
All of that you've just said. I mean, it's a very beautiful and very multi-dimensional for sure. I mean, going from the last piece to this piece, I mean, there's so much in the first piece, the base, and now that I understand that that was the energy behind it, it explains some of the beings and energies that I can see and feel in that piece. But then you put it into this, and it's like the base is the individual drop, here is the collective ocean of consciousness, and so there is, anywhere you look in this image, there is a sense of something individual, but then there's the whole piece too. Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly complex, but I love what you said about being able to reflect each other's multi-dimensionality to each other. That is also a really interesting idea to sit and play with. But this has so much going on. There's so much life and frequency and vibration. So did you add another piece in, or two pieces in, Shirley, or is this just the same piece we just saw repeated over and over?
Yeah, this was exactly the same piece. Let's go back to it. This was the base energy. And
Uh-huh.
all I did was to repeat it 3 times across and three times down.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
And it's like there's a whole set of other um like pieces that have emerged, right, with the squares and the crosses, and somehow a different type of more I would say more square-like structure is appearing in what was originally a much more kind of very natural fractal form. So it's like almost like pillars are appearing on
Yes. Yep.
the whole piece.
Mm-hmm. And there is that bit about sort of going into the microscopic and then zooming out to the macro view of trying to understand the world. And I guess if I were to stretch this a little, it applies not only to us as humans in this experience that Earth is going through, it's also Earth herself. So what is the internal rumblings of this eclipse doing for Gaia? Because it's New Earth, right? How is she experiencing this eclipse? What is it opening up? And one of the key messages of this portal as we go along, I realized it was a portal of interdimensionality and interconnectedness. So if we choose to step through, we are given the opportunity to embrace more of our multidimensional gifts. You know, as humans, we always label ourselves because that's how we give ourselves self-worth, right? Again, a very Venusian theme for this Taurus eclipse. So someone may say, I am a mother, or I am a director of something, marketing. I work as something, you know, there are all these labels. And we're never just that. We're so much more than that. You know, we are somebody's best friend. We are a great listener. We are a comforter. We make the best cookies, all of that. And that's so much a big part of who we really are, but we often forget that. And I think this portal reminds us of all of those little gifts that we often sort of put aside because we were so focused on survival. Again, a very Taurus theme, and asking us, like, put that aside for a while. Who else are you? What else are you? And try to embrace more of that, because chances are in the 5D New Earth, we're going to need more of that than whatever skill it was we had in our job, so to speak, as a secretary or as a director or whatever. So that's going to play into how we contribute into building New Earth together.
Right, and so this interesting that you said there, and perhaps like you to share a bit more about this. So, so even though I did introduce you with those various titles, and this is something that's coming up for many of us doing these transmissions and podcasts at the moment, none of us really want to be pinned down to being this, that, or the other thing, but somehow still in the language of the third dimension, we have to give some kind of word to something to describe what we do. But you're also a very gifted musician, and I'd like you just to share a little bit about your background in music and how it's evolved from how it started or how you perceived it as a youngster to where you're feeling into it now, because I think it's a really good way of exemplifying what you just said.
So when I was 3 years old, I was in kindergarten, a very regular kind of a kindergarten. And my teacher said to my mom, "Did you enroll your daughter for music lessons?" And my mom was like, "No, we're not very well off. Like, why would we learn music at this point? I mean, she's only 3." And my teacher, whom I have no idea who she was today, but many thanks to her if she was ever listening, she said, "I think you need to put your daughter somewhere. Like, she seems to be really gifted." So that began my journey. So I did the whole classical training thing, the Bach, the Beethoven. I grew up with the great masters. I was very much more present in that world than I was here as a child growing up in Asia. And I actually went on to music school. I performed all the way through till I was in my early 20s. And that gave me the opportunity to travel all around the world. I went to, you know, places like Japan, Hong Kong. I was very blessed to travel around most of the European countries, just performing. So for a young child, I think I had the opportunity to really, you know, like see the world beyond where I was. But by the time I reached my mid-20s, everybody said, "Get a real job. You know, you're no longer a child. You need a proper job and you need to have a proper life." So I had to put that aside and get a job in marketing, where I was doing creative as well. But, you know, it was all about brand language and branding and all of that. So I sort of had to shut down a very big part of myself that I really loved. And I know it sounds simple to say, you know, I let go of a hobby, but thinking about it, I've been doing that since I was 3. It's been almost 40 years that I've had music in my life. And it's ridiculous to think now that I've let go of such a huge part of myself and didn't think I would be grieving over it. So a part of what came through for me this eclipse personally was the reconnecting of sound. So today I see music as not only Bach and Beethoven, whom I still love, but it's a little bit more than that. Like, it's progressed with where we are. We understand sound a lot more now. So beyond our traditional instruments, how are we utilizing tones, for example, and the voice, which everybody has? You know, how do we, even in the simplest ways, how do we use mantras and chanting? How do we use a simple drum? How do we combine all of that together to help us get back in touch with our core frequency, which is something that I call our soul song, because every soul is made of frequency and it has this unique hum. And I think it was Pam who said that astrological charts have a song. And I think that's very true of the soul itself. So even if you let go of your own cosmic chart, your soul has a song that is trying to sing to you all the time and be expressed into the world in harmony with everything else that's being created. So how are we tapping into that and releasing that out into the world today? So that's kind of, in a very sort of fluid way, where I am now with music.
Well, which is also very interesting because I know that you're very Piscean, and so you have a lot of water energy in your own personal soul song astrological chart. And you know, there are many examples of how sound and water have been used together for healing. And we can see that when you put certain frequencies through water in bowls, it creates different shapes and ripples and all kinds of stuff. So, and, you know, I find it interesting that there is an idea that water is going to be the memory bank of the future. We won't need to use microchips. We'll be able to store information in water, which I think is a really amazing idea, because that's exactly what we do with plant and flower essences. We store at a quantum level in the water with intention and with the co-creative energy of the intelligence we're working with, all kinds of information. So I think it's really interesting how we can break down these kinds of concepts from a much more quantum perspective and start to think about things differently. And I know that that's something that we've been talking about with the art that you've been channeling, and you know, how you see this art and all the other things we've been talking about already today and on other calls, about breaking out of the mold and finding a new way to change the energy or charge behind certain words that we use, or even the need to express words at all, to give ourselves a title, for example. But do you want to move on to the next slide, Shirley? Maybe we can incorporate that too into what we're discussing.
I do. And I just wanted to say that, so this came through while you were speaking about using water as a memory bank. Does this piece remind you of the work of Masaru Emoto, where snowflakes sort of appear together with the different frequency of words and emotions that they were infusing into the water? So I don't know if this is the plants trying to communicate something to us, because they're made of water too.
Right, and it's almost like it's almost like it being stored in etheric matter, which we could also understand to be very water-like in its nature in many ways. And so I like that idea that this is possibly an etheric ripple that we are experiencing as the plants communicate with us through you as the channel, and they're giving us these different layers of their information, and it can be encoded in different ways, as you've already shown from just one image. It can be extrapolated out in a fractal fashion and show something different. So I think this is very exciting, which is why we're doing this. You know, it's showing or revealing to all of us, and again, this is off the back of the elder version, I guess, in many ways, how when we are clean and clear, something can be expressed that maybe we don't immediately understand, but if we sit and we connect with at the heart level, at the higher mind level, then we can start to decode it. And I think this is a really exciting, pioneering development that we're going to start to see more of in many areas in New Earth in relation to quantum intelligence.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. Let's move on. So this is another piece that came through on top of, you know, the base energy. And I thought it was really interesting because it had both feminine and masculine qualities to it, like the sort of the interlacing layers. Like there's so much to unpack. Like you could go from one layer to another, and when the energies first came through, I didn't know where to look. I was so ungrounded. I didn't know how to express it all. Yeah, so, you know, there is that structure and then that fluidity, which is kind of where I guess we are now in that divine feminine masculine balance that we're trying to get to. How does this piece ring for you?
So yeah, again, very much what you've said, but and the way that I see that is like the structure of the green circle with the four arms. It feels much more masculine to me. It feels grounded, and then on the earth, it's a similar kind of color tone to the background. But then you've got this very feminine, very, I think, Venus kind of energy that feels much more maybe, how to say, yeah, maybe more emotional, more fluid, that sits somehow within the container of the imprint image. I guess what one feels like an imprint, the other one feels very fluid. And what I also get with this is that the kind of the green background imprint feels like a nodal point. It feels like there are points of connection here that would connect to other nodal points. So I see this also being a bit like a representation of self in masculine and feminine energies in different ways, and it's almost like a layering up. Or even a layering down, you can say, but I'm feeling it from the first image with the base, and then the green masculine energy, and then the more pink feminine energy.
Yes, I think that's how I feel too. And as soon as I finished this piece, because the pieces were created in layers, I would just move on to the other before we talk about them as a whole. I took away the energy, which is the masculine energy. And I was looking at this piece and I was like, I know you from somewhere. You know, I've seen you before. I can't recognize the energy. And it took all of like, I don't know, 3 or 4 days later that I was like, oh my God, this is the energy of Artemisius, because I channeled one piece during that first Artemisius immersion. And this was it. And this was that vine that was just coming through. And I because I was so new to her energy, I didn't know what it felt like. So when I look back at this piece, I was like, so this is what it means. Like, in our world, I think when we look back at this piece, we've all grown up in the 80s, 90s, and we were taught to be very individualistic, haven't we? I mean, it's all me, and me for myself, and like, who am I? And the whole ego thing, with where we were actually putting aside our more spiritual selves. And sometimes I feel, oh gosh, this is a challenge coming through. Sometimes I feel like we've sort of given the ego such a horrible reputation, right? We've demonized it. We've said like, oh, if you're spiritual, you must kill your ego, and you must not have any ego, and you must not be this or that. But if you think of it the other way around, and we spoke about, acknowledging the darkness and then bringing it into the light, the ego only serves to protect us, right? It serves to preserve us as who we are, like life. And I think the ego is also doing a ascension together with us into 5D, where it becomes integrated into the light. And then we see how that individuality contributes to that bigger picture as well. So this is completely unplanned. All of that just came out as a channel message. And there is that understanding how we fit into that bigger picture of connecting not only as a species, humanity, also with the plants, the animals, with Earth herself, and eventually linking back to the cosmos, because I always feel like the plants are gateways into the stars and into inner Earth.
Yeah, and as I'm just listening to what you're saying and looking again at the image, what I see is the much more kind of, I guess you could say, rigid structure of the masculine underneath holding, and then a seemingly more kind of how to say, not random, because it's not, that's the whole point. When you look at the feminine energy, it's also in balance, but it's much more kind of free and going in all directions, but somehow the two sit perfectly on top of each other. And it's just like, I think that's what we're seeing here, is that it's not that one is okay by itself and you don't need the other one. It's actually like, no, you need to have both, but they need to have a structure to sit in, so that the freedom of, I guess, the more feminine energies are allowed to express themselves while still being held within a much more, how to say, formalized structure, which is what the masculine energy seems to be presenting. And again, I think this is just another way of us understanding various aspects of our energy and how we relate to the cosmos and even to the astrology of the time. So, and I love the center point as well, with the vine. It kind of speaks to me of the four directions and holding the center of the space in a balanced way. This to me also speaks of the horizontal plane. How do we hold ourselves in the horizontal plane? And I see like the four directions in the middle as being that kind of balance here in the middle world. So we're still building up our structure. It feels like this is maybe some sort of blueprint that we're being given from the plant world about how to center and ground ourselves and create our space without having to, limit ourselves, but without being too Piscean and flooding everywhere, which can be tricky sometimes when you have a lot of water in your chart. So yeah, please go on, Shelley. Let's see the next one.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So the next one actually comes, as I said earlier, like, I think the plants are gateways to the cosmos, and that's one of the first messages I received in my very first flower essence channeling. Somehow they connect to the stars And for a very long time, I couldn't understand it because they were so grounded, right? I mean, you grow plants out of the earth, like, and as I've been going along this journey, I realized that actually everything is interconnected. Like, as humans, we are made out of stardust, and the plants come out of earth, but earth herself is a star. I mean, she's stepping back into her place in galactic lineage, right? Like we forget that. You know, we think of the seven wandering planets and we forget Earth's place in there. And when we think about, you know, if you resonate with the idea of star seeds, Earth is a very important place in galactic history at this point. So why would we ever discount the fact that anything that grows out of Earth as a manifestation of Earth herself doesn't link us back to the stars? So this is a piece like a portal in that sense. And then I'm being reminded of even things like you spoke about how we work the Mayan wave spell. I mean, when we think about our ancestors in that time, where there was very little sort of science, for example, or yeah, I want to say science or astronomy to explain a lot of what we see now. They instinctively knew to look to nature for clues about, you know, what was happening in the skies, and then they would do it vice versa. They would look at the stars to understand nature. So I feel like that's another piece that's coming back online for us to reclaim.
Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah. I mean, I totally concur that this looks and feels like a portal. Somehow it also looks and feels like a spaceship, which you could say is also like a portal in some ways. But, you know, having just gone from what felt like the more horizontal plane, suddenly we're into a more vertical axis, which I think is interesting too. And it speaks to me of us being an antennae, that we are the antennae to connect us down to the Earth Star chakra and also up to the Soul Star chakra, and also contained within the Vesica Pisces too. So, there's many, I mean, it also looks like a staff. It looks like a very futuristic space staff or something. So this one to me definitely has a much more kind of obvious extraterrestrial kind of energy to it. And, you know, we have to be very careful about how we use words like extraterrestrial, because sometimes they have the wrong connotations. And so perhaps if we try to find new language to refer to the plant beings, because obviously they are beings from off planet in many, many ways. So again, this is where the words are not always with us in these moments, but hopefully as the new quantum light language is transmitted to us through the plants, through our journeys into those realms, and through the artwork and through sound, we'll be able to find different ways of expressing how we see ourselves, not just as human meat bags, but actually as antennae to be able to connect to divine consciousness and Mother Earth consciousness. So I love this piece. I think it's really powerful.
Yes, me too. Yes, and I don't know, have you ever had this experience where you look into a flower or a plant, you know, in the shape that it grows, and you think you see a face in there? You know, it's got a little bit of that. It's almost as if the veil thins for a moment and you see beyond sight, the human sight. And you know, a lot of what we see is being conditioned by what the brain interprets as signals, right? So you may be seeing more, but your brain is just not sort of comprehending. And I think as we become more and more quantum and less linear, this is also an opportunity for us to let go of linear language. And I don't mean stop speaking, but to explore communication and expression means more than, you know, just the languages that we have now at the moment. So definitely something to think about there.
Right, and again, just looking at, I mean, for sure, the more you look at all of these images, the more you see different beings and you know, potential input coming. But this whole piece feels like instructions. It definitely feels like a series of instructions for something that we don't quite understand yet, because it's obviously in a language that we're not able to remember at this time. So I feel that these pieces are going to keep transmitting information for a long time to come, in the same way that, you know, the immersions that we do, even though they finished the live versions already some time past in some case, to go into them now, the information is still in the transmissions of the discussions that we did with everybody, and that's where the real holographic or quantum information is contained. And I think that this is something that many of us are starting to understand, that we can open up and be clear and call in and let the energy of the plants transmit through us, whether it comes out in the words that we share, or the understandings we get at the quantum level, how to communicate and how to then bring that into our world. And I think dandelion is one of the best plants for showing us how to be much more quantum in our understanding and flowing of everything. So yeah, like I say, very powerful piece, Shirley. I like this one.
Okay, so we're going on to the next piece. And when this piece came through, I had a lot of sort of insecurity bubble up. I was like, oh, is it too empty? Like, am I missing something? And it just kept saying, like, don't fill it in, don't fill it in, don't try to, decorate it or try to over ornament it. And I didn't get it. I didn't get it until yesterday morning. And I just kept asking, my higher self or spirit. And I said, why is it so hollow in the center? And as soon as the words came out, I was like, oh my God, I know what this is. It's the concept of that hollow bone. Like, how can you pour into a cup that is filled, this very Zen concept? Like, if you keep filling everything up, you don't allow the space for things to come through. And then instantly I started to see the fractal energy come through the piece. And I was like, this is Elder Mother. Like, this is magic.
Right. Yeah, I totally see that. I mean, as we've talked about on the Elder Immersion, the actual trunk of the elder tree is hollow and can be used to play pipes. So if you were to take a cross section and look down through it, it probably would look something like this. But also, from where I'm sat, there is a very powerful being sat in the middle of that hollow bone. It's very clear. So I'm wondering also, what aspect of that energy is that some aspect of ourself as spirit, maybe reflecting through the hollow bone? Is it the universe talking to us? So many things in this picture, and never mind the untold amount of light language written in the different circles. Full power.
Yeah. But the background of the piece has not changed. This was the first energy that came through, and we didn't see that when it was just that piece, and it's a framing. It's how Mother Elder tells her story that allows you to see it from another dimension, another way, another layer. So it's so interesting when you allow them to show you and throw out all of that preconceived notion as to what you think it should be or it has to be, or it's so it's I thought this piece was incredible. I think this would be my favorite piece of the lot.
Right. Interesting turnaround from being the one that you felt most unsure about or insecure about. It's kind of, again, the healing of the Elder Mother is to take the insecurity.
Yep.
At how wonderful you are, or how wonderful life is, or how amazing magic can be. And you're right, I didn't realize that image that's in the middle, the almost like owl-like spirit that is there was already in the image. It just wasn't brought into our awareness, and somehow the framing's done exactly that and allowed that to come through. Wow. But again, I just love the idea of the hollow bone and looking down through it from above. I like that.
And if you kind of see it, when we did the pieces for Elder Immersion, they always had a wreath around them, like a ring, and then there was that center orb. And I still see it here. It's just a lot more translucent. It's almost at that point where you get to the heart of Elder Mother, and you strip away all of that, pretty things to look at, and you strip away everything to its bare essence, and then she starts to show you the world through her lenses. So I thought this piece was really powerful. Like, the less it said, the more it said.
Yeah, we have a saying here, hashtag keeping it empty. And I think that this picture really is all about keeping it empty. And like you said, allowing space for the higher impulses to come through us and move through us, not for us to necessarily to hold on to or take ownership of. And I know that's a big part of what you say about your work is it's not about you, it's not about Shirley or the work, it's about what is the piece saying to every person who looks at it. And that in itself, I think, is pretty quantum in that idea. And wow, yeah. So do you have any more, Shayla? I can't remember how many you had.
Yes, I have one piece. So afterwards, this
wow,
piece
this
came
is
yeah, and I thought this was really powerful. So this is in one of the pieces that came through Elder Immersion. It spoke about sacred geometry, and I think the idea, even at a very simple level, sacred geometry is a shape of energy that we're at least able to visualize, and we can process and understand, and be reminded of the magic of everything, of the cosmos, of the divine plan. And this piece again brought that back, like there is that connection to the full 8 directions. And then with that center sort of a circle, which is still Elder Mother's sort of a protective ring. But that sigil right in the center, to me, it's very Piscean, because I did a channeling in Virgo season for the full moon of Pisces, and a very similar energy came through. So I always understood it as a very Piscean thing. And it was the flow of that water, that really connects all life. It was also a connection that led me to feel that this is what the U immersion, and I'm probably getting ahead of myself, might be bringing to us, because there is that interconnected quality that we never quite see in things, because we're designed to be linear. The brain is a linear thing. So, I guess we're zooming out all the way and seeing the big picture. And instead of things getting more and more complicated as we think it would in a kaleidoscope, what it does is it clears into one thing. And that is that central pillar that connects us all, whatever we call that, life force, prana, chi, universal wisdom, love. And there is that offering to us, like this is maybe a part of the reward or the destination that we're eventually getting to, where we find a place in ourselves that connects to the wider scope of all things.
Wow, what's really jumping out at me is the very embryonic nature that sat in the middle. It feels like the creation of something new, of a new life, a new form, a new idea, but still held within all of that structure in the womb space and the protection. And you can feel that sense of safety, that whatever that is that sat within that more square-like structure within the circle as well, it's like square in the circle, right? And within that, we've got the more illuminated space to be free, to be creative, I guess, to be in our higher minds, and to be able to bring that down into the more structured reality of 3D is encouraging us to let go of the old and to start opening up to a new way of being that is much more quantum, much more from a 5D space, manifesting down into 3D and then creating in that way, rather than being reactive in the 3D to what is happening to us. We are taking control of our own actions and destiny by being much more intuitive, listening to our inner voice much more, being clearer and free of anxieties and lower frequency traumas. And once we get to that space, we can start to be much more creative and just allow things to flow. And as you said, we are moving into a new state of being, and that is, I think, a really important motif. And as you alluded to, we will be doing an immersion with you. So maybe just before we wrap up, we'll talk a little bit about that. Shirley, but is there anything you want to finish with this last image before we come to the conclusions and what's where we're flowing to next?
I guess tying it back to the eclipse, because this whole set of artwork came, channeled with inspiration by the eclipse, is that in that more structural, so the squares and the star, like in that more structural form that is our life that has already passed, you know, the way that we are, the programmings, the karma, the stories, the lessons we've learned, even the pain and the trauma that we hold. What are we birthing in the center out of creation of that? Because we're being offered the opportunity to step through a portal, and this portal leads to new earth. How are we rewriting the narrative from this point on? And we now know that we are co-creators in this journey. So how are we taking the pain or the traumas or the lessons or the love that we've been given, and how are we going to transmute that and translate that into a story that is more love, that is of more service to each other and to New Earth, and contributes to that wider tapestry that we're now creating together. So I think this is the invitation of this eclipse. I mean, creating New Earth, and Venus is, you know, Taurus, it's all about survival. But are we still stuck in fight or flight mode of survival? Or can we take that to a new way and say, let's create something out of joy, out of love, out of peace? You know, what comes through and what's truly me? So I think this is the invitation of this eclipse. The death and rebirth. Yeah.
Yes, the ultimate pinnacle of the Scorpio season, really, I guess. And okay, let's come back to the sharing, Charlene. We'll have a couple of interesting final thoughts, because I feel like we've had a very interesting journey already today through the eclipse, but through the art, and definitely something is wanting to reveal itself, which is what we hoped would happen through this discussion. And yeah, you know, for those people who are not so familiar with the affiliated website, with this YouTube channel, Quantum Plant Healing, we've been doing a series of immersions, and a lot of that has been opening up to a global community, particularly the Artemisias and Dandelion. These plants really helped us to get centered and aligned, but also to reach out and connect. And that is a big part of the quantum future, is like, you know, we have all of these very strong connections. Often, most of the people I do the interviews and transmissions with, I've never even met in person. And yet there's a very strong higher mind connection, which is how we're able to do discussions like this. And I think that that's a big part of what we're moving towards, is a understanding, or maybe a new interpretation of how do we meet other people, how do we step out ourselves, how are we being authentic in ourselves and just showing up like, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I do, I'm happy doing what I do, I don't have to worry about this or that or the other thing, I'm just me. And I think that that is a really beautiful thing, and in that process of freedom and safety that last image gives you, you can dare to be yourself, and not only be yourself, but be celebrated for being yourself. And then in the same way, you want to celebrate all of your fellow brothers and sisters. And I think that's really beautiful. And as we move through to the end of the year, we've been guided to also not only do the U emotion, but just prior to that, doing a small piece of work with the plant yarrow and the throat chakra, because one of the things that came out of the elder immersion that we talked a fair bit about on some of the calls with that was the idea of being silenced, or not being able to express ourselves, or being distorted. So what comes out is not what we meant to say, or somehow the energies are all mashed up and manipulated. And so again, we can't express ourselves. And so that's, we've been guided to do a little piece with yarrow so that we can all learn to express ourselves and use the words. Many of us right now are trying to find new ways and new language to talk about the things that we've been doing for many years, without allowing it to again get boxed into some sort of dogmatic thinking. And you know, so that's come through before the U tree, because the U tree is the final piece in the sequence of 4 immersions, very much like you and your artwork. The way that it's channeled, the way the plants come through and show us how to work is very much the same, and we just have to be open to the process without always understanding exactly what we're signing up to. You know, so so the last piece in the sequence is the U tree, which is the tree of eternity. It is Yggdrasil. It's a direct conduit to 5D consciousness. But in order to be able to expand from the sense of being the hollow bone and being the channel, the U tree again asks us to take another step up and to become the U, and to become that big hollow bone that can channel all that is. And that's really the step into mastery and being able to understand that here in the 3D, we can have full access to our higher dimensional selves in the most appropriate ways, of course. We don't want to fry the circuit boards down here, because sometimes in 3D, it can get a little overwhelming when upstairs decides to do a big information dump, and we have to be careful that we don't blow our energy fields. But that aside, you know, one of the things that we were just joking around with beforehand is that we were wanting to move more to a unity consciousness, right? So, you know, many of us are liking to play around with the hashtags and, you know, stuff like that, just to have fun with the words. But again, you know, becoming the you is like becoming the fractal kaleidoscope that we saw at the beginning in the equinox sequence. So as with all of the pieces that we've done since we connected, Shirley, I really feel that there are messages and journeys being unfolded for us, that if we can see and feel into them, we can see what the universe wants to tell us or what the plants want to tell us. And I completely concur with you that I feel that this eclipse season is inviting us to step into that Venus star point energy that we had at the beginning of the immersion and the ways we worked with, but also at the beginning of Scorpio season, and to help guide us through the more difficult aspects of Scorpio work, but also to stay in the heart and to still have that place of expression. And even when all can seem dark and gloomy, which sometimes working with the Artemises and Elder, it can a little bit whilst we're working through our shadow, we still have that energy of Venus in the heart space, illuminating, allowing us to channel and be creative and express what the plants are really wanting to help us with. And that's certainly, I think your artwork at the end of the immersion was just a huge inspiration for so many of those people who did that very powerful work that we all did together for 2 weeks, and bring it into a place of, wow, look at that. You know, that's the culmination of 2 weeks of kind of inner work, I guess, being expressed by the plant and channeled by yourself. So I think it's really amazing.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as we step into this new phase, I would say this new chapter of quantum plant healing, you know, we're only at the tip of the iceberg in understanding what quantum really means. I mean, yes, we can say that we understand we shouldn't be linear, and therefore we should be multidimensional. But you know, the scope of multidimensionality, I don't think our human brains can fully like fathom that. But it doesn't mean that we don't try, you know. And this is as we do more and more of these clearings and releasing, which is also what the full moon is offering to us. We really do need to, don't we, like let go of the junk and gunk, because we are becoming more crystalline, and which means our internal structure, our DNA, is turning more plant-based. So it's the idea that, you know, we, just like the plants, just like the crystals of the earth, are actually crystalline structure. And the more we get back to that, and the more we clear our DNA for that, we'll be then able to hold more light. And this is something I think it's not new to the collective to understand now. Like one day we will be like plants. We will be able to take in pure nourishment from sunlight and water, and we won't have to have so much dense food anymore. But to get to that is a process, but we have to start somewhere. And I think the plants are showing us that they are living in the way that we'll be being eventually in the future. So, you know, they are constantly opening the path to that. And if we follow the breadcrumbs, follow the yellow brick road, then you know, they start to teach us how to live. And then as we do that and more light comes in, we'll be able to open up more of our multidimensional gifts. So, you know, there will be people who would be coming up with new ways of being, new abilities. And, you know, the children, for example, of the future, they will have so many new abilities that we couldn't even think of. So it's something to look forward to, I think, this quantum way of being.
Right. And, you know, also saying all of that, it's reminding me that, you know, my view of many of these plant spirits is they're like bodhisattva beings who've come back to help because they can. And we see them as the simple dandelion. And yet the truth is the simple dandelion is an incredibly omniscient being that can spread himself all over the planet, deliver his wisdom, his medicine to anyone that cares to listen, can survive numerous terrorist attacks on all of the environments that he likes to grow, but still just keeps on turning up and keeps on giving. But actually, you know, when we work with the plant and we start to understand that, we see the immense being that is dandelion manifesting as this very almost humble plant that most people look down on. And I think that in itself, there's so many profound lessons there to understand that the plants want to share with us, that you can be as great as these beings are, but then be as humble as the dandelion is in its 3D form, and not be attached to our physical human bodies either. It's like to have let go of that, but still be present in the human realm, to still be in our case working with humans, right? We work with plants all the time, and they're showing us many new things. And again, just alluding to another plant that's come through in various discussions is horsetail, and that's been talked about with Zach, the Ascended Master, who's channeled by our friend Janet Trelawa. And he talked about the need to become more silicon, or be more silica based in our physical form, so that we can receive more light. But he also advised that that's not such a good idea to go to that place until we've cleaned out some of this, you put the junk and gunk, because otherwise it can be a little bit too much of like the system. It's like, I want to go to the light, but oh my God, I've got all this crap that's weighing me down, and it could maybe not have the best effect. So this is where we have to be also humble enough to understand that there is a process with the plants. And sure, you can dive into any of them at any point, but what we have been guided with the immersions is to do the dandelion first, because he gives us that sense of all of those qualities, but also to be super present and to be open to then start being a more clear space for higher dimensional wisdom to come through. So I concur with you. I think this is the beginning of a very exciting period for all of us. And again, it's about where do we put our attention and intention. I think that's a big part of what's to come as well.
Yeah.
So before we conclude for today, Shirley, hopefully we're going to be doing many more of these pieces. I think this is a really interesting way to try and understand what is being presented to us at the astrological, energetic level, but through channeled artwork. And, I really enjoyed doing these with you. And is there anywhere that people can find out or see more of your artwork? Do you have like an Instagram or Pinterest page or anything?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, and you can find me at Lemurian Dreamweaver.
Cool, nice. So thank you very much for today, Shirley. It's been wonderful to again see the images and to open up to the information they want to share with us. I hope all of our audience have found it interesting too. And here on the Quantum Plant Healing YouTube channel, we are opening up to different ways of discussing things, looking at things, breaking things down, not being so attached, letting go, being in a place of trust, and all of these things. And actually finding in the process it can be quite a lot of fun. Particularly when we get to connect to our like-minded brothers and sisters all over the planet. And that's again one of the most wonderful things that the immersions have allowed us to do, is to connect to so many people of similar minds, similar hearts, but also with so many different gifts. And certainly from ourselves here at Quantum Plant Healing, we're very open to what comes out of what we do with the immersion, just letting everything flow organically and allowing new channels and new experiences to present themselves. So I know this was probably one of the first times you've done something like this on YouTube, Shirley. So I'm so grateful. I'm certainly super honored to have been able to chat to you today. Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience before we finish for today?
No, just be really present, drink lots of water, and just let the eclipse energy flow through. It's powerful for everyone at this time. And Uranus is in the mix, so you kind of never know what's happening with him. But just trust that it is for the highest good.
Yes, I definitely concur with that. So thank you everybody for listening today on this most powerful of days. This energy will be with us for some time yet in the eclipse. So let's see how it all unfolds for all of us. But certainly if you take through the energies of what we've been discussing this evening and the plants in general, I'm sure that you're going to be heading on the right track. So thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Shirley, again for this wonderful transmission. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Ciao for now, everybody.